Blessings, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Dane, your host. Hope you're doing splendiferous wherever you may find yourselves. Growing up in high school, which was early 80s, through and including just past the mid-80s, I was enthralled by hair metal or glam metal or whatever, 80s metal, 80s rock and roll, whatever you want to call it. And I really took a shine to this music. I became engrossed, obsessed with it. And then looking back as a man who recently just turned 57, not that long ago, and it's not just turning a new number, but this happened long ago where my romance, or bromance, if you will, with hair metal has, for the most part, come to an end, but not totally. It's a bit of a paradox, kind of like, I guess, a love-hate relationship that I have with hair metal. And again, I hate the term, but it is what it is. So this video is just going down the rabbit hole of exploring my rocky romance with hair metal and how it, what does that mean for me today? And have you experienced this, or do you still, grab on to hair metal like it's still the best thing ever? Because, as I said, there was a time in my life where it was just, the cat's meow or whatever silly cliched phrase you want to use. So I'm going to go through a list of 50 to 60 bands and talk about them, what they meant to me or what they don't mean to me and why, that kind of thing. But before I do that, I want to talk about a few bands, 8, 9, or 10 or so, that often get lumped in the hair metal category, but I don't think they deservedly belong in that label, if you will, or category, even though they may have some songs or an album here or there that fits in that category. So let's go down that rabbit hole for that first little rabbit hole first. And the first band that comes to mind is Hanoi Rocks from Finland, then moving to Britain. Yeah, they have some hair metal-like stuff, but they're also described and fit into the mold of punk, glam, if you will, glam rock, new wave to some degree with, I think, their third album, and even some avant-garde stuff because you have Michael Monroe with the saxophone, some kind of, homage to David Bowie, if you will, perhaps. So Hanoi Rocks, while having some glam metal type songs and influences and ethos, they're much more than that. They're more complicated than that. Alice Cooper, if we take 4 albums, Raise Your Fist and Yell, or is it Raise Your Fist and Scream, Constrictor, Trash, and Hey Stupid. Of those 4, Hey Stupid's the one I like the most. Trash, I'm not a big fan at all because of Desmond Child. Just realized I have to write down another band here, perhaps. Because of Desmond Child, totally, set me off the Alice Cooper train for a brief period, and then I came back with more inspiring stuff, The Last Temptation, that kind of thing. Along Came a Spider, some wonderful stuff there. So Alice Cooper, and then we get to Kiss. In some ways, the pioneers in one of the original glam bands because of the makeup, but hair metal, not really until they take the make off with the LIU album and then going forward with Animalize and Asylum, and then never really turning back away much from the whole glam metal shtick, with the exception of maybe Revenge, which still has some glam stuff to it in small spurts. I Just Wanna right? It's so stupid, but and the ballady stuff on Hot in the Shade, which is a great song. Forever, the Michael Bolton penned composition, or partially penned. I actually like that song. Ballads are the order of the day when it comes to hair metal. I'll stop doing that. Sorry. But yeah, the early Kiss stuff, Kiss Alive and the 3 albums before that has, the moving towards the glam metal of the 80s, but it's still hard rocking in so many ways and again, it has the potential and the moving towards that, but not quite yet. So it's a little bit of that, but it's more of a 70s glam to me than it is hair metal for, distinction purposes. So I exclude Kiss because of the first album through and including Dynasty. Although Dynasty, you're starting to see them go down that road with the ballads of I Was Made for Loving You, Sure Know Something, and Magic Touch. And all those 3 songs are wonderful. And then you get, of course, Unmasked, and then, of course, The Elder, and then Creatures of the Night. So post Creatures of the Night is really where they, for the most part, commit to the 80s metal vibe. And then there's, the reunion stuff with Psycho Circus, couple songs that are a throwback to the 70s. The title track comes to mind. Peter, like Dynasty, not really on that album much at all. Ace is back on that, but his contributions are less than inspired. You get the grunge album Carnival of Souls, and, we go from there. So, and then the makeup comes back on and what have you. Next is Def Leppard. You have 3 wonderful albums. You have the On Through the Night album, the debut, underproduced, but I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. Heavy in some ways, also new wave of British heavy metal. The second album is their magnum opus, their masterpiece. Have a ballad in Bringing On the Heartbreak, and maybe another song, but it's the new Led Zeppelin in so many ways. Pete Willis, because of that, it's just a marvel of an album. One of my favorite albums of all time. And then the third album, you get a little bit of Pete Willis on a few tracks, but you have Phil Collin, who I never thought fit in the band. And you got more of a glam 80s metal vibe going on because of songs like Photograph and what have you. But Foolin' comes to mind, right? But still a solid record. I would give that a 9 out of 10. And then it all falls apart for me with Hysteria. And at that point, I'm out. Scorpions. They have a hair metal period in their catalog, but their first album, very psychedelic. And then you get the hard rockin' era with Uli Jon Roth. And then you get the proto-metal stuff continuing with Uli Jon Roth through and including, say, half of Love Drive maybe, or it's Love Drive where they go into more commercial hair metal waters and then pretty much never looking back. And I drop out after Love at First Sting, just nothing there for me to like. Whitesnake, slide it in, has a bit of a hair metal to it, and of course Whitesnake 87 and then Slip of the Tongue. But their overall catalog, everything before those 3 albums is that hard rock and blues stuff, a holdover from Deep Purple, right? David Coverdale's solo albums. And then after the Slip of the Tongue, yeah, it's very, very hair metally still, but overall half of their career is still that blues-driven hard rock, quasi, metal, if you will, if you talk about songs like Still of the Night, that kind of thing. All right, so Whitesnake, Van Halen, they're full of party songs and paving the way like Kiss, but in a different sense for hair metal that is to come. And then jumping on said hair metal train, you can argue with 1984 and 5150, sort of kind of thing. But for me, they were always just a rock band or a hard rock band. Those first 4 albums, I would include Diver Down as well as hard rock. So I don't consider Van Halen to be hair metal, but maybe proto hair metal. Y&T, to a small degree, but I see them just more like Van Halen, although a different sound as just a hard rock and wonderful band. W.A.S.P, a lot of ballads in the discography. Let's face it, this is Blackie Lawless's band, and there's nothing wrong with that. I've grown quite the W.A.S.P fan in the last 5 or 6 years, let me tell you. When I had written them off after their 3rd album, and then discovered the 4th album. That's a video for another day, but you have some wonderful ballads, and part of the reason I like the W.A.S.P ballads so much more than other bands that have come and gone or still around that people listen to is because of Blackie Lawless's voice. Very unique, or mostly unique, and I'll talk about that perhaps in another video. I could give you a taste of that, actually. I remember someone saying that Blackie Lawless sounds a little bit like Marvin Lee Aday, also known AKA Meatloaf, and I never got that. I remember saying, okay, let me put on 2 out of 3 ain't bad, and the rest of that album, Bad Out of Hell, and I didn't hear it. And then one day I'm driving and I hear a song from that album. I can't remember which one, and then I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I hear Blackie Lawless in Meatloaf's phrasing a little bit. So I went home and put on the first album, and then I put on the fourth album, Headless Children, and say, okay, there it is. When Lawless sings towards the end of his cadences or certain syllables or phrases, there's that like aftertaste of Meatloaf there. It's hard to, that's pardon the pun. So this kind of like, like when you drink a beer and you have the backwash. Not that that's a bad thing with this vocally. It's a wonderful backwash. Of course, with the beer is bad. But, sorry for the rambling here. But my point is that as the echoes or the end of a certain cadence or phrases is segueing into the next syllable, there's that taste, that lingering, almost quasi Meatloaf component. And then there's a hint of Kevin Dubrow, but despite that, Blackie still has his own voice. But there's hints of those here and there, comes and goes kind of thing. All right, so W.A.S.P. I don't consider a hair metal band because the unique vocals from Blackie, and when they're heavy, and to me, not much in the way of the quintessential pop music disguised as heavy metal, which is a different video I talked about. Is hair metal really metal? Take a look at that if you like. So W.A.S.P. I don't consider a hair metal band, although Blind in Texas is a hair metal song because let's face it, that's a stripper pole type song. I remember someone posting, there's this wonderful YouTuber called Classic Album Review, and he was talking about the new W.A.S.P. box set, Savage, and some guy posted, I don't get how you like W.A.S.P. and Motley Crue. Well, I don't think they sound like one another almost at all. The exception is Blind in Texas sounds like, girls in a similar but not the same fashion. All right, so those are the bands that I don't include as hair metal: Hanoi Rocks, Alice Cooper, Kiss, Def Leppard, Scorpions, Whitesnake, Van Halen, YT, W.A.S.P. One more would be Crocus, because despite the fact of Headhunter and an album or two after that, if you look at their whole discography, all over the place with respect to different labels of rock music. Okay, all right, so let's talk about the bands that I do think are hair metal and how I've had this rocky romance with hair metal. Not from the start. As I said at the beginning of this video, I was in love with this. This was my favorite of all time. Next to the 70s, yes, there's the rub. Music, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, that kind of thing. My second favorite subgenre of rock of all time. And keep in mind, I'm 14, 15, 16 at the time. Okay, so let's talk about Autograph. I'm going to be mostly alphabetical here. There's only one song I like. I remember listening to the first album and listening to stuff after that. I remember Blondes in Black Cars come out. I'm like, this is awful. Autographs, Turn Up the Radio is a great song despite its cliched sound to it. I often listen to it. I haven't listened to it in a while, but it's a very good song. But they're a one and done type of band for the most part, and flavor of the month. And so it's that. Next is Bang Tango. They have one really good album, and that's the debut. And again, for the most part, a one and done. They have other albums, but they had their 15 minutes of fame, and that was it. And the shine with them wore off for me long time ago. Someone Like You is a great song, but not enough of that. Next is a band I quite like, and that is Black and Blue. But the problem is I only like 2 or 3 of their albums. Hold On to 18 is an amazing song. It's a great song. I remember that when I was a kid and a teenager, and it was very inspiring. Okay, let's do that. Let's hold on to our youth as much as we can. That's a double-edged sword. But regardless of that, there's some wonderful stuff in their catalog. The first 2 albums is where it's at, and then later on their catalog, there's a song here and a song there that's marvelous. But overall, Not a band I listen to monthly, but a band I do return to quite a bit. So this would be a band where I put a check mark next to as one of the shining parts of this oeuvre, sorry for the French, this subgenre, excuse me, sorry. This video is not very note-driven, just a few things, and so I'm kind of very improvisational today. Blue Murder. I saw them live opening up for Bon Jovi, and the rendition of Still of the Night I thought was less than inspired. John Sykes was a marvel. May he rest in peace. What a great guitar player. And Appice on drums is a marvel as well. But I just, that first album I would label as a very good album, not a great album. I don't listen to it very much. But there were, they have a second or third album after that, and that was it. Just kind of a flash in the pan, unfortunately. John Sykes in Tigers of Pantang and Whitesnake and other arenas was more inspiring to me than this. So yeah, Blue Murder is not an album I listen to much at all anymore. Bon Jovi. This was my band when I was 15. But what happened with I remember that first album, I liked half of it, but I liked it enough that I would put it on the turntable. The second album, much of the same. In and Out of Love is the hit on that album. It's a very good song, not a great song. And then when Slippery When Wet came out, I was like, okay, you got some keyboards now, more involved in the production. And at first, I latched onto that with hoops of steel, to quote Shakespeare, and then the mere exposure effect kicked in, and it would just overplay, and me listening too much when I came home, hearing it on the radio, and then I realized, this just does, its shine wore off is the only way to put it. So Bon Jovi I don't listen to at all. And my dad got really into Bon Jovi, and that kind of was like the rebel in me is like, I'm not going to listen to the same music my dad listens to, kind of thing. It's stupid, but anyway. Although I did listen to some of the same, ironically, paradoxically, like Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Crosby, Stills and Nash, CCR, Lynyrd Skynyrd, that kind of thing. All right, Britney Fox. Don't have much to say about Britney Fox, but if I'm going to listen to someone with a raspy voice, I'm going to listen to AC/DC or W.A.S.P. or Aerosmith, or another one that's coming to mind is Nazareth, kind of thing. Just this type is, it's just something off-putting about this particular type of raspy voice. So Britney Fox never appealed to me. Bullet Boys. Ted Templeman wanted to relive past glories and reignite the spark that he'd had with Van Halen, and we can see it in the lead singer, whose name eludes me, who dyes his hair blonde, and has the look of a new David Lee Roth. And I do like that first album quite a bit, but not much for me to love after that. They're still around today, God bless them, but really trying to reignite the spark that he had with Van Halen, the producer Ted Templeman, the engineer, known for his work with the first Montrose album, or second as well, and just not a dynamic enough band. Another flavor of the month type one and done album, in the sense one and done is that they have other albums, but it's only that first one or so in the catalog that's really the gem in their discography. Cinderella, those first two albums are masterpieces, if you ask me. Tom sounds like a combination of Steven Tyler and Bon Scott, Bon Scott. This is the gravelly type vocals that I do like and appreciate. And then their third and fourth album are more in the blues vein, if you will. And those are very good. Not great as the first two, but I do like these four albums, and I listen to Cinderella all the time, especially those first two albums. So Cinderella gets a pass as a band in this big collection of hair metal bands that I listen or don't listen to. Danger, Danger, and then Dangerous Toys. I don't have anything to say about them except that Never My Cup of Tea, Here Today, Gone Tomorrow, Flavor of the Month, and we'll move on to a band I was engrossed with. Not so much today, but a band that I still listen to quite a bit. I'm talking about Dokken. That first album is not where I came in. I came in with Tooth and Nail, and that is a great album. Remember, I'm a teenager, and I'm pretty much, I'm a teenager where I'm hearing all of this that I'm mentioning today. And so Dokken, I take that back. The first song I heard from them was Breaking the Chains. But then I got Tooth and Nail. Then I went back and purchased the original Carrera records as an import from an import guy in downtown Orleans Parish. He ordered it for me. It took about a month to come in. And the only songs I like on that is Paris is Burning. The opening guitar solo is great, and Breaking the Chains, and maybe one or two other songs. You have Juan Crouchet, who's on the album, goes over to Rat, as you know. But it's really the second album where they find their signature sound. And then the third album is their magnum opus, which is just wonderful. You have a wonderful compromise of ballads and heavy stuff on the third album, Under Lock and Key. Second album as well, but the third album is I think, quite a bit better than the second. But the second one's great as well. And then you get the fourth album, which now that I'm trying to think of it eludes me. Back for the Attack, if I remember correctly, or is that just a song? Anyway, it's got the crest of the dragon. Really cool album cover. They just re-released it as I saw it the other day, Digipack at Barnes & Noble. I did not grab it. I only have it in MP3 format. And I listened to it about 3 months ago, and my love for this album isn't as much as I remember being there. I remember liking the whole album from start to finish, but listening to it, I like about half of it. And I mentioned the word compromise a second ago when it comes to Dokken, and that's part of the problem. Dokken, ironically, Dokken himself doesn't want to compromise, and George Lynch doesn't want to compromise. We have the same problem with the Runaways, sort of. As you know, Lita Ford wanted to be more hard rock metal in the band, and Joan Jett wanted to stick with the punk, vibes of the band. Here it's Dokken wanting to do the ballady stuff, the singer-songwriter slower type songs with an occasional guitar flourish. Lynch wanting to do more heavier stuff. And hence the breakup that soon follows. You have the album Dysfunction, and then a whole new lineup with Reb Beach coming in, and these disastrous albums just didn't do much for me. So I still listen to Dokken quite a bit, but it's mostly that second and third album, the two songs on the original, and then half of the fourth album. I used to love Heaven Sent, but now I listen to them, it's like, So. But I put a check next to Dokken as a band I still like to listen to. Europe gets a pass. This is another band I failed to mention. Europe should not be put in the hair metal label because while, like Whitesnake and Scorpions, they experimented or went down the sellout path and did some hair metal stuff with, what's the big album? Someone help me out. We're Heading to Venus and Still We Stand Tall, because maybe they've seen us and welcome us. The Final Countdown, right? So that, and then the album after that, and then the first two albums are nothing like that. They're good but not great, and then their last 4 or 5 albums are okay, but it's really not my cup of tea still. So Europe gets a pass. I was gonna say Aerosmith. Yeah, they're very hair metal-y, but like the Scorpions, the first 6 or 7 albums are blues-based hard rock, great music. Then Desmond Child takes over, and I'm out at this point. So Aerosmith, yes and no, but I love me my earlier Aerosmith. All right, Faster Pussycat. Enough's Enough is a band that the critic Martin Popoff has described as very Beatles-like. I don't see that. I don't hear that. Never been a big fan, just way too commercial for me. The next is the band Extreme. I can't say I've ever been a big fan of Extreme. I've wanted to like them, but not my cup of tea. And this one I'm on the fence about. I'm not sure if we should include Extreme as a hair metal band. All right, next is Faster Pussycat. Like Bang Tango, I love that debut album, but I can't put a check mark to them as a band I still listen to. I rarely listen to that first album anymore, despite how good I remember it being. I do like their version of "You're So Vain." I do listen to that quite a bit. That was on the Rubaiyat box set of various artists. I forget the label that made that. Maybe Elektra, I'm not sure. Firehouse. Never saw the appeal. Way too uber commercial for me. Next is Great White. This is a band I saw live opening for Judas Priest. That opening debut album where it's their heavier sound is phenomenal. And then you get them going down the hair metal road, doing some Ian Hunter / Mott the Hoople type stuff, which I do like that cover stuff. But overall, and then they got some light and shade, Zeppelin-y kind of, that light and shade with Rock Me and doing the Zeppelin cover, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. And then, so Once Bitten and Twice Shy are good albums, but not great. But after that, I'm pretty much out. But I put a check mark next to Great White because of those 3 albums I still listen to from time to time. Next is Guns N' Roses. I have them listed as belonging to hair metal, but now that I'm thinking of it, I don't see Guns N' Roses as a hair metal band, really. Just for me, yes and no. So but do I listen to them a lot? No. So no check mark next to Guns N' Roses. Next is the band Helix from Canada. I remember loving that song, Heavy Metal Love. I think it's on the No Rest for the Wicked album. There were, and I remember in that song, Heavy Metal Love, the part of the lyrics are, Caress of Steel, and I think Rush was that an homage to Rush for some reason. Anyway, so I like that album, but I don't love it, and I listen to that one song, Heavy Metal Love, and that's it. So I don't put a check mark next to Helix as a band that I'm still having a romance, if you will, today. Icon, that first album, I still love this album today. Second album's not bad. I'm still having a romance with Icon today, so put a check mark next to them, although they're pretty much a one and done, because that second album's not as good as the first, and they pretty much fell off the radar, unfortunately. Keel and Kix, I'll list these 2 together. Never been a big fan. The Right to Rock is okay. It's I have hard time now as a grown man songs that deal with wanting to rock, really. So leave that to Kiss kind of thing. So Keel and Kix. Kix has a couple good songs, and Don't Close Your Eyes is a masterpiece. The opening, still today, it comes on the radio, and I'm thinking this is Supertramp, and it's that good. But so Kix, one album really that I like, so no check mark, but they have one fantastic song. Next is LA Guns, never saw the appeal. So Lizzie Borden, that first album is phenomenal. I'm not sure if we should call these hair metal. The second album's not bad. I would lump Lizzie Borden more in the vein of kind of very similar because of the guitar to Queensryche, sort of. So I'm taking them out of the hair metal label and putting them in with Hanoi Rocks, Kiss, Def Leppard, etc., having a executive decision here. And then where they go wrong with me is the concept album about wearing the mask, and you got this creepy mask on the cover looking at you. The mask is falling on the floor with the curtains above the stage. It's okay. It just doesn't. So I'm not really putting a half a check mark next to Lizzie Borden because I love that debut album. All right. Next is London. This is a historic band and not a historic band, and what I mean by that is you've had quite a few people be in the band who go on to do much better things with their careers as musicians, as if London is a stepping stone for. You have the lead singer from that was in Mod or goes on to become in Mod, and of course you have Nikki Sixx and Blackley Lawless, to name a few. So, but London's claim to fame, they have 3 or 4 albums. Don't Cry Wolf is amazing, 1986. Love that album. So kind of a half a check mark next to London, I guess. Lynch Mob, I only like the debut, so I'm not putting a check mark. It's something I barely listen to anymore. So Lynch Mob. Motley Crue, Love those first two albums. But I'm not putting a check mark next to them because they were such a disappointment. I know I'm kind of wishy-washy with whether or not I put a check mark next to them. I guess a half a check mark next to Motley Crue because those two first albums are fantastic. Are fantastic. So, but there was such a disappointment that I can't really wholeheartedly put a check mark next to them as, a band that I still constantly listen to. I endeavor to listen to those first two albums maybe once a year, if that. Mr. Big, never a band I took a shine to. This is something I mentioned in, my video, the decline of rock music, shameless plug, and I mentioned the problem with sorry folks, the when you have a band that is a coming together of people from other bands, supergroup, how that's detrimental more often than not. It's a double-edged sword. Having Paul Gilbert and Billy Sheehan in the same band just didn't gel like I thought it would. I like a couple songs and that's it. I've gone back to the discography a couple times and explored the whole thing twice, and it just doesn't do anything for me. So no check mark next to Mr. Big. Poison, I cannot stand a single song from them. Of all the bands I mentioned today that are in the hair metal label, Poison is the worst, perhaps the worst of the worst, because, and I never had a romance with them, because it's too much about the look that they're introducing instead of, the Kiss Black and Silver or the black and red from Motley Crue or what have you, Rat. You've got, fuchsia and white and pastel colors, and it's just, that's not rock and roll. And this is just party music. Of all the bands here that are pop music disguised as metal, Poison takes the cake. All right, Pretty Boy Floyd, much of the same thing, never took a shine. Next is Quiet Riot. You have one Dynamite album or close to Dynamite album, and then a couple good songs on the second, maybe one good song on 3, and then that's it. So I'm not putting a check mark next to Quiet Riot either, although I love that debut album. Rat, same thing with Quiet Riot. Debut album is just short of a masterpiece. That opening EP that comes out before is dynamite, but after that, you got songs like You're in Love, the epitome in many ways of a song that is a pop song with a heavy metal guitar solo, and that's not enough to be heavy metal in my estimation. And then Lay It Down, I cannot stand, because all Stephen Percy does in the song is say lay it down over and over and over again, and it's boring, and nothing from the second album was just a disappointment. That I'd return to Rat every time when they put a new album out, and I'd be so uber disappointed. Next is Rough Cut, not a great band, but at first album is decent. I don't listen to it very much. I'm not putting a check mark next to them as a band I have a romance with still, but that I used to listen to this album quite a bit in high school. Saigon Kick, outside of Love Is on the Way, not a band I care for much at all. Skid Row, this is a band I put a check mark next to. 3 great albums in their discography. I'll leave it at that. Slaughter, never took a shining to. Mark Slaughter's voice, I've talked about this before. I cannot stand. It's annoying. Steeler, that debut album. Talk about Keel, right? You got Yngwie. Yes, please. This is an album I return to over and over again. Check mark, please. Stryper, check mark next to them. I love those first 4 albums. But anything after that, not so much. But 4 albums, it's a win. So this is a band I return to quite a bit. Tesla, 2 wonderful albums. But here's the problem. Tesla, to me, are not hair metal. They're hard rock blues, so they don't belong in this label either. But check mark next to Tesla. I don't like anything after the second album, unfortunately, but oh well. TNT, Knights of the New Thunder. Shine has worn off. Used to have this on vinyl, so no check mark. Tokyo Blade belongs in the new wave of British heavy metal. But remember, new wave of British heavy metal is not a genre. It is a movement. Yes, Tokyo Blade has some hair metal moments, but to me, not enough to be labeled as hair metal. But if we label them as hair metal, I'm putting a check mark next to them because I like 4 or 5 of their albums. TSOL, True Soldiers of Liberty, they started off as a kind of a punk band, and then they got very commercial, so I can't keep them in the label. They have some hair metal type stuff. Not very good. I like their earlier stuff much better, so no check mark, really, because I don't listen to them that much. Tora Tora, like Dangerous Toys and Danger Danger, never saw the appeal. Cliched to infinity kind of a thing, so they're out. Twisted Sister, I only listen to 4 or 5 songs that I like, so no check mark. My favorite song is The Price on the 3rd album, Stay Hungry. For whatever reason, the shine is worn off. Ugly Kid Joe, never took a shining to them. Vandenberg, love that debut album, but I don't listen to it very much. 2nd album's okay, 3rd album's okay. Some of the new stuff is okay, but not enough to put a check mark. So Vandenberg. I missed one. Jafria, a spinoff from Angel, Call to the Heart, too commercial. The rest of the album's okay. It's got heavy moments, I guess, but to me, one and done type album. Never really cared for anything after that. Vinnie Vincent Invasion. Don't like Vinnie Vincent at all. Don't like his music. I liked him in Kiss, so no check mark. Vixen, Next Please. Never took a shining to that. Same thing with Warlock. No offense, ladies. If I'm going to listen to hard rock, I'm going to listen to Pat Benatar, who in many ways is proto-hard rock with her first 3 albums in many ways. Warrant, to me, is like Poison. Pop music disguised as heavy metal because you have a guitar solo that's really heavy now and then, like Rat, of course, and much of what's going on here. That seems to be a shtick of much of this, if not all of it. I Saw Red and Heaven, to me, are not even true ballads because, to me, they're more soft rock than anything. Cherry Pie, stripper pole type song, no thank you. So Warrant is out. White Lion, same thing, uber commercial, and then of course Winger, never saw the appeal to this day. So there you have it, folks. These are the bands. Most of these I don't like. So let's recap the bands that I do like, that I put a check mark next, that I return to over and over again to listen to. Cinderella, Dokken, Great White, Icon, Motley Crue's first 2 albums, but with an asterisk. I'm going to go ahead and throw in Motley Crue as a check mark because I love those 2 albums. Sorry, I keep being wishy-washy about that. Throw them in, but that's where it ends for me. Skid Row, Steeler, Stryper, Tesla, although Tesla's out, I don't consider them hair metal. Tokyo Blade, and that's pretty much it. So of the 50 or 60 bands that I mentioned, there's only 6 or 7 that I still gravitate towards to a lot, like still enraptured with, still having a romance with. Everything else here, much of what I said, about half of what I mentioned or a third of what I mentioned, I didn't like at all. And then the stuff that I used to like and have a romance with, like Autograph and Bang Tango and you name it. Check mark next to Black and Blue. I think I skipped that one. Still love them. But here's the problem, folks. Of the bands, some of the bands I still put a check mark next to. They only have 1 or 2 or 3, tops 4 good albums. So that's part of the issue that I have with hair metal. Lack of staying power. Here today, gone tomorrow kind of thing. Like Guns N' Roses, you have a great debut, and then, at least for me, there's a falling off after that. And for me, not much to like. Now, let me continue by saying that how did hair metal, 80s metal, go from being my second favorite type of music of all time after 70s rock, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, early Whitesnake, you name it, right? Well, thrash. When Metallica's first album came out, that pretty much made me realize the heavier stuff is where I want to spend my time with. Okay? And then after that, you get the grunge. And when grunge came along, okay, still listening to the 70s, still listening to the 80s stuff I just mentioned that gets a check mark too. Okay, still listening to thrash, you betcha. Okay, Metallica at one point, those first 4 albums was my favorite band at one point, supplanting Zeppelin and Rush, and because they were so unique for a brief moment in time, and then they went into the mainstream, right? And then you have everyone jumping aboard. Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer, well, they're contemporary, so not jumping aboard. But after that, you get Testament and you name it, right? Sodom and all the German, and some of that's quite good. Destruction's my favorite German thrash metal band. So, that I have a love and hate relationship with. So thrash and grunge dethrone the hair metal scene for me. And as you know, if you've seen The Dirt, there's that scene where you see the poster for Pearl Jam's first album as where things begin to take a turn for the worse for bands like Motley Crue, including Motley Crue. And grunge, like hair metal, ironically, is a subgenre of rock that I've kind of fallen out with respect to having a romance with. I barely listen to that anymore. There's a little bit. That could be another video. The new wave of British heavy metal. Bands like Iron Maiden coming in, right? And Judas Priest, still, a band that I discovered in 82, and Iron Maiden as well. And Saxon, right? Dethroning, because it's heavier or it has a motorcycle shtick with the case of Saxon. And then later on, Doom coming in. Doom metal is, to this day, one of my favorite. I'd rather listen to Sleep and High on Fire and heavier, gruffier stuff like Motorhead, which is new wave of British heavy metal. I'm sorry, is the first wave of British heavy metal, than Cinderella and Guns N' Roses and stuff like that. And then experimental rock, your noise rock like Swans and Cause of Sui, which is the last 20 years of my life, give or take, especially Swans, Cause of Sui, the last 4, I believe. So that unique style stuff. And I'd rather listen to Hanoi Rocks, Alice Cooper, Kiss, Def Leppard, Scorpions, Whitesnake, Van Halen, Y&T, W.A.S.P, the good stuff from them than this hair metal-y stuff, with the exception of the bands that I put a check mark to. So is it that I grew up and got more mature as I get older? I think that's part of the reason, but I think it's also because my change in taste, because of all the things that I mentioned, thrash and grunge and new wave of British heavy metal and doom and experimental rock and all of that and other things. My love of jazz in the last 20 years has, I'd rather put on a Miles Davis record than listen to Cinderella or the hair metal that I still have a romance with. That romance is still there, but I have a better mistress in jazz fusion with Miles Davis. So, change in taste, essentially, but also an epiphany, that revelation that a lot of this is just here today, gone tomorrow, because of it's just pop music, as I said before, disguised as heavy metal. It's in some cases soft rock, like Warrant, a few songs, right? But there are others, and the novelty wore off. It just happens. This is normal. This is, if you get depressed, like I did at first, it's okay. There's other things to grab onto that will, be part of your attention and part of your personal ethos. If you will. There's nothing wrong with that. People get all bent out of shape when you no longer like the things you used to like. There's no reason to get bent out of shape. Again, if you like these bands that I mentioned, more power to you. God bless you. It's great that you love them. That's your personal, I'm not trying to offend anyone here. That's your love, and you should embrace it. Don't, just because I don't like it doesn't mean you shouldn't. And I'm not saying that. Would never tell someone that, oh, you must like what I like. I'm not a artistic Nazi or fascist at all. So more power to you. Embrace those with whoops of steel. But for me personally, my romance has for the most part died. I'm not that 14-year-old person anymore who has to put on a Twisted Sister record or put on, Bang Tango or Quiet Riot's second album, which I listen to quite a bit, but it doesn't do anything for me anymore. If I'm going to listen to, with the exception of Come On Feel the Noise, I'm not going to listen to Mama, We're All Crazy Now, Quiet Riot. I'm going to listen to the Slade version. So all of the above, maturity, grew up, change in taste thanks to these other genres or subgenres. I had an epiphany, a revelation about this is really just pop music disguised as metal, if you will. Some great guitar solos there, but it's overall too commercial in so many ways. The novelty wore off in many cases, as I said, with some exceptions. Again, the check mark. And too much of the same. You know, Forrest Gump says life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Well, with hair metal, you pretty much know what you're going to get. And the cliched rabbit hole, so to speak, isn't really my thing anymore. And here's another thing. As much as I love those that first Bang Tango record, as much as I love Black and Blue's first 2 albums, Cinderella's 4 albums, Dawkins' 4 albums, all the things that I said, Skid Row's 3 albums, Stryper's first 4 albums, Steeler's debut, much of the discography of Tokyo Blade, 4 or 5 albums, I've gravitated towards things that are more cerebral. Think of why is Rush so appealing to me? Cerebral lyrics. Why is Swan so appealing to me? Because of the poetic nature of Jira's vocals. Why is W.A.S.P so appealing to me? Yeah, you have some party type stuff and some, cheesy stuff here and there, but this is cerebral. This is amazing. Another video down the road, folks. It's Crimson Idol Re-Idolized. Amazing. W.A.S.P, Golgotha, as a Christian, that song Golgotha, and it's not until recent years that I realized that Blackie Lawless became a born-again Christian, and hats off to him for that. I have to admire that. Not going to preach here, but I have to admire that from him in doing that. So while I do enjoy cerebral music, I also like party music. Let's face it, where would I be today with respect to heavy music if it wasn't for Kiss Alive? So I still listen to music that isn't so cerebral or cerebral at all. Think of the cheesy lines in the Kiss song, the following lyrics. She's a dancer, a romancer, I'm a Capricorn, and she's a Cancer. That is horrible lyrics. Well, the song is fantastic regardless. So I'm still going to listen to, music that has to do with having a good time. But some of it is just so commercial, so cliched, so banal. So I'm not saying don't listen to party music. Again, do what you do you folks. You do you. As I tell my cat sometimes when he's not in the mood for affection. Okay, Bowie, you do you. See you later. All right. So cerebral music. But again, I have to listen to music also that isn't cerebral. Another reason why I've moved away from the hair metal, my romance with hair metal, is because I want music that's going to wash over me. I've said this so much in the last, 3 or 4 months. Music that you just plant yourself. You just sit down. Let's say I liked Poison, Nothing But a Good Time at one time, and I never have. But if I did, I'd want to get up and move and dance. That's a dance song. Something you throw at a party. And that's why I love modern jazz. When jazz moved away from vocals and moved from the dancing type jazz, that swing era, the pre-bop stuff, really not my cup of tea. Some of it I like. Like if I lived in the 20s, I'm sure I would dance to swing music. But the jazz that I love is the jazz that is the bop and the hard bop and the jazz fusion, the heavy period from Miles Davis, if you will. But the other stuff is good too. But why I listen to Swans, why I listen to, say, Rush's Hemispheres and 2112. Sit on that couch or sit on the floor and just let it wash in and just listen. Again, plant yourself type music, not do the dishes, not work on the car outside, not adjust things on my pedal board for my bass, focus, right? So there you have it, folks. This is why my romance with hair metal is no longer much of a romance, if at all. And finally, let me add that the romance that I have with music that will never die, of course, because it's in my DNA, is the 70s music. Zeppelin, Purple, Heap, Black Sabbath, early Judas Priest, you name it. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. God bless. Bye now.